everyone, and welcome to our executive series of people in leadership. Today we have Stacey Epstein talking about women in tech and the future of the Silicon Valley. And we're really excited to have Stacey be the first to kick off the series. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so you guys will get a link to the recording and the slides after the webinar. If you guys have any questions for Stacey, you guys can chat us in the chat box, which is located on the lower left-hand side of the screen. Or you can, if you're on your Twitter game, hashtag AskCaptora any questions. The point of this webinar is to be very conversation heavy, so we definitely want you guys to participate. Pick Stacey's brain about any questions you have about women in tech. And without further ado, I want to introduce Paul, CEO of Captora. A little bit about Paul. He's been in tech for about 20 plus years, impeccable track record. He was a CRO at Marketo, SuccessFactors, NetApp, Informatica, and he is a father of 3 girls, so he definitely can speak about women in tech and, you know, getting them ready to be in the tech world. And without further ado, I'll pass it on to Paul.
Great. Thank you, and welcome, everybody. Hope everyone's having a terrific holiday season and end of your fiscal and calendar year. I'm super fired up to talk to Stacey Epstein. We worked together back in what I refer to as the SaaS 1.0 days. So back in the early 2000s, growing SuccessFactors. And that led us to get to know each other and help me to understand that Stacey is just one of the most impressive people I've worked with, women or men, but clearly one of the top women executives that I've had the opportunity to work with. And people ask me, what are some of the words or attributes that describe a great executive? And when I think of Stacey, I think of a person who has a clear vision. She's extremely focused, brings a lot of passion to what she does, as those that have worked with her will attest to. Intellectual honesty, so you can have a great debate and you know it's coming with the big hat on. She's thinking about the company first and people first. She's a calculated risk taker, and maybe the most important attribute is applying that all to a personality and a style that's focused on execution. I would call Stacey an execution maniac. So she is extremely valuable leader. Not only to women, representing women very well, but to executives in general. And so I thought that would be an interesting way to think about execs. Just to give you a little bit more of a profile of my own background, went through the companies that I had referred to, started Captora at the end of 2012. We've grown quite a bit. We're over 70 customers now, and we're headquartered in Mountain View, California. We're between our Series B and C round of funding. And think of Captora as the SaaS platform for the top of the funnel. So we turn what were anonymous buyers into known leads that we pass into our customers' funnel that then quickly move through the funnel and turn into new customers for our customers, like DocuSign, ServiceMax, Marketo, et cetera. But this isn't about Captora. This is about women in tech and women leaders. So I want to shift over to just talk about Stacey a little bit more. You can see her background here. So it was at Oracle Clarify, SuccessFactors, ServiceMax, Banjo, and it's also a lot of her teamwork and competitiveness comes from playing soccer. And she also is a parent of rising future stars as well. And Stacey, you heard my description of you. Sorry to embarrass you, but if you think about your drive and your focus and passion, I guess the first interesting question that I came up with was, where did that come from? Where was that? Was that your parents? Was it early experiences? But what do you think lit that fire for you that's led to all the success you've had in your career?
That's a good question. Certainly something I think about a lot as I both start to mentor people in their careers, and also, as you mentioned, I have 2 kids. They both happen to be little girls. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old daughter. And so I think about, what is it at this age, at a high school age, at a, out of college in your first job age, what is it that drives that maniacal execution focus? I don't know, and I probably should say thank you for the compliments. They were flattering and slightly embarrassing, but I appreciate it. I don't know. Some of it is certainly the way I was raised, and I'll give a shout out. I see my dad has joined us today, so hello, Father. But some of it is just encouraging people to have an environment where they can take risks. And, I certainly had that in my childhood. I feel like I had a lot of freedom to try lots of what, these days parents would never let their kids do. I was allowed to do. And it was certainly, I don't think I ever felt like I was at risk. My parents certainly didn't ever let me do things that would potentially be really dangerous. But, I was allowed to walk down the street and go to friends' house and play. I was allowed to, go take hikes at an age where kids probably aren't able to do that anymore. And I think that was part of it. And it translates so well into business. And I know, Paul mentioned that we worked together at Success Factors. He didn't mention I actually worked for him. He was my boss, which was an awesome experience. But I do think, as I look back to Success Factors, it was an ideal place where we were encouraged to take risks. So not only was it an environment where it was okay to take risks, but, we were encouraged to think outside the box, try something different. If you fail at it, it's going to be okay. Just look at look at the failures and understand how you might do that differently going forward. And I think that was really one of the recipes for success at Success Factors. We figured out some things that had never been done before that were huge wins, and we did that only because we were willing to take risks. And I think having that environment my whole life really has been helpful for me to see that as an opportunity.
That makes a ton of sense. And when you think about one point that you brought up, focusing on your strengths, I think is a really important point. That I think too many people early on in their careers worry about or think too much about what aren't their strengths, when they really should be spending a lot more of their cycles thinking about their strengths and how to expand them and play on them, and then work with people that complement where they have weaknesses, but don't spend a lot of their own time on it. How have you thought through that? Getting to know yourself, your own strengths, your own personal vision, and then how did that develop for you? And were there any specific examples in your past that were breakthroughs for you, either people or situations where it created a real breakthrough for your career?
Yeah, I think it's not something that I was super thoughtful about early in my career. And we didn't really talk about my background before I started working. But in college, I was an English major, and I mentioned my dad earlier. He owned an ad agency, the biggest ad agency in the state of New Mexico, the whole time I grew up. And everyone told me, "Oh, you're going to be just like your dad. You're going to be in sales and marketing. You'll be such a great business leader." But when I was in college, I wanted to be an English professor or maybe a sportscaster. I wasn't interested in business. I didn't take any business classes. And I sort of was anti the whole business world. And then I got out, and another long story how I got to Oracle, but I started working at Oracle, and I realized that, there were a bunch of smart people around me doing things that were really dynamic and interesting. And I knew that I didn't have the background. I mean, I literally didn't take a single business class in college. I certainly didn't know anything about technology, especially in those days when not everybody has their own personal technology devices. But I think that I was so driven to want to do it. I saw other people doing it. I didn't think they were any smarter than I was. And what I did was I decided that I needed to know how to code in order to be good in technology, which wasn't true, but at the time I didn't know that, and there weren't a lot of mentors for me. So I enrolled. I was an admin in Oracle at the time. I enrolled in a Berkeley extension class in coding and SQL. You probably don't even know this story, Paul. But, I mean, I was like 22 years old, just out of college, thinking that I needed to know how to code in order to move ahead at Oracle. So I took this class. I used to take BART over because I didn't have a car. And let me tell you, it was the most miserable experience. I mean, let's just face it, I am not meant to code. It was not – the first day I just thought my eyes were going to cross. I didn't even know where to begin. And luckily it was a pass-fail class. So I passed it, but it was not without a lot of pain and dread going to that class. But, I put it on my resume, and if nothing else, it gave me confidence. It gave me the confidence to say, look, I don't just know, English literature, and even though I don't have a degree in business, you should consider me for a higher level position at Oracle than just being an admin, because not only, did I pass this course and I put it on my resume. I can't remember when I actually took it off my resume, but it was on there for a while. But I think, it also helped me demonstrate that I had the tenacity to go fill out what my weaknesses might be and where they might be along the way. And I, later in my career, in fact, even just recently, as I'm looking to make a job transition, and I got some really good advice from a VC who said, as you're looking at what your next thing to do is, don't just think about your strengths and weaknesses, but ask other people to tell you about your strengths and weaknesses, because you might learn some things that you didn't know about yourself. And I've done that, and I've learned, and it's really helped guide me. And I'll even give you an example. I asked my former CEO at ServiceMax, Dave Yarnold, what he thought my strengths were, and he said, well, really above and beyond being a good marketing leader, you are an inspiring and passionate leader for the whole company. And one of the things I thought I might do next was go into venture capital, and I immediately just realized you don't get to do that in venture capital. When you're a VC, you are advising other people how to lead their companies. You don't really get to lead. You don't really get the opportunity to inspire large groups of people. And that exact discussion and dialogue is what helped me realize I wouldn't be happy in that role, because I would always want to be diving in and doing it myself. And it's led me to consider even more higher leadership positions than I've had to date. And so I encourage everyone, don't be afraid to go take that class. It might kill you in the process, and it may not even matter on your resume, but it gives you the confidence to go do something risky and different, then do it. And secondly, don't just rely on your own assessment of yourself. Go ask other people, and, strengths, but also weaknesses too, to help you fill out what you want to do next.
Yeah, two things that stick out there. One is don't let mistakes be anything other than a learning opportunity. And as a young person teaching yourself to persevere, lean in, get the best out of it, and make that a building opportunity versus one that tears you down mentally. And that mental toughness will serve you well, and the voice in your head will be a positive one versus I can't do something. And that's just such an important breakthrough, and something that I know I learned and tried to apply as a father raising 3 young women is playing team sports, which I always am impressed when I see a woman with a resume where they played competitive team sports, because you learn how to play a role, you learn how to win and lose, you learn how to play a position to make others better around you, and put things into perspective and not be too high or low in a winning or losing situation. I think that's such an important life lesson that you pointed out there. There's a couple of questions that came through in a similar vein. What are the biggest challenges or hurdles facing women in tech? And then for you personally, and how did you work through those?
Yeah, so I personally think this is an awesome time for women in tech. I think the balance has shifted in our favor in a big way. I have been parts of lots of conversations. I mean, one of the biggest issues in the tech industry right now is recruiting. And just as Paul just indicated when he looks at resumes, I mean, a lot of leaders are looking to add diversity to their team. They're proactively wanting to find women because they believe that diversity leads to better performance, as I do. I have been part of lots of discussions with men that say, I want to hire more women. I really do. I need a better way to find them. I need more candidates. So I think if you are a woman and you want to get into tech, or you're in tech and you want to advance, now is an absolutely great time. I will say, even I started my tech career in the very early 90s, and I never felt that held back myself either. I've always felt like there's been opportunity for me to move ahead. I think some of it lies within us, and that confidence and that bravery to go do something that a lot of people tell you maybe you can't do. I don't think we should, as women, allow ourselves to be conditioned that we are at any kind of a disadvantage. I never felt that way, and I still don't feel that way. I feel in some ways people are giving me, it's almost like the old affirmative action debate, and I don't want to get into politics, but I do feel like people are willing to give even more consideration to women as they try to round out their diversity numbers. So I think the challenges are, a lot of them are within ourselves, and being willing to just go out there and round out your weaknesses and make it happen. The other counterpoint to that I've certainly experienced myself is the whole balancing a career with being a great mother. And that changes the picture a little bit. I think that's absolutely an obstacle to getting ahead. And that certainly, when I had my first daughter, it was the first time that I realized that was going to be something I'd really have to give some thought to. And, Paul knows the reason I left SuccessFactors is because I had a big job. I was running marketing across the globe. I had a lot of people in different countries reporting to me that relied on me. I had set a precedent where I worked tirelessly, many times 7 days a week. And then I had this beautiful little daughter, and I looked at her and said, I can't see myself doing the same kind of job that I did and being the kind of mom that I want to be. And I think a lot of women face this, and I happened to have my daughter much later in life, which for my career was great. I had a lot of years to just pour that time into the job and not worry about other people that depended on me. And so I was able to advance a lot in my early years. But I do think it's something that women face. Men are starting to face it more and more, and I think that's great. I think there are more men that don't just assume that mom's home taking care of the kids. I think men are wanting to have that balance too. And I think that will help women. It will help the children we're raising. But I think it's something that has to be given thought to. It's something I still struggle with every day, is balance and giving enough to my children while also giving enough to my own aspirations for my career. But I do think it's something that has to be really thought well about. I think it's great that companies are being more flexible and understanding that, the number of hours you're in the office doesn't necessarily correlate to your performance. It's your performance that should be measured, not face time.
Well, it's interesting because the one difference that I think women have in this area, thinking about the work-life balance, which is never perfect for either men or women, but women have to deal more with that the pressure of growing up thinking I've got family duties, and then there's way more social pressures on women about playing the role of the mom in more aspects of life. Being CEO of the house, as well as being an executive, as well as being responsible for raising the kids. And it's not only within your own head, but those social pressures can be pretty intense. And I'm sure, I know you face some of that. How have you worked through that, or how do you recommend women think about that part of it?
Yeah, I think it is, and it comes innate. I mentioned I have 2 daughters. It's amazing watching them at an early age play with dolls. There's a motherly instinct that is not conditioned to us. It's not social pressure on us. It is something that just comes with being female. Not everybody has it, and everyone has it to different degrees. But I think, for people to say, oh, well, society makes women think that they have to be at home raising the kid. There's an anthropological aspect to this. I think of Anne Marie Slaughter, who, she's the one that wrote that famous article in The Atlantic. I think it was called Women Can't Have It All. And then she just recently wrote a book basically talking about the role of men and women, and basically saying that, if her husband hadn't come in and taken, I think they called it the leadership position at home, she wouldn't have been able to carry out her career. She was director of policy planning in the U.S. State Department. So she had a huge job. Then he wrote a follow-on article about how more men should take that lead role in parenting at home. And I agree with so much of what they say, but when it comes to me, I'm not ready to give up the, quote, lead role. Now, I'm ready to share the lead role, and I happen to have a husband who is very, very active, and I think, you could argue on any given day who's the lead role at home that day, but I haven't given up the lead role. I haven't said, look, I'm going to have the great career and you raise the kids and I'll just, be home on the weekends. I'm not going to do it that way. So, I think that our society really has to continue to figure out how to make this work, and it's not just tech, it's all of business. I think women want to be available at home to help raise their kids, and we've got to figure out a way to make that work. And it's the same old thing of when I was little, I didn't ever want someone to tell me I couldn't do something, because that just made me want to go do it more. And I feel the same way now when people say, oh, you shouldn't be a CEO because you've got 2 little kids at home. And there's part of me that says, no, I'm never going to jeopardize my children, and my family comes first before my job always. But I think you can do it. I think you can do both and be a good mom and raise good children and be very present for your children and also run a company. And I'm sort of out to prove that, and I love finding other women who are proving that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because you told me that story before, and that kind of questioning was coming from another woman, not a man. So
yep.
It's a unique pressure that way, right? So it's pretty interesting to think about that. The other side of it is that, think about yourself as a role model to your girls, and as they grow up, they're seeing a strong mother, they're seeing a mom as a leader. I think that's incredibly important, and that can be done in a lot of ways. It doesn't have to be that you're a CEO. But the mom in a role that's not just traditional, that it's okay to break the rules of old school rules and be the leader that's inside you and make a contribution to the greater world. And it doesn't have to be in business either. But it's exciting to see this being more and more of a conversation, as well as companies like Salesforce, where I know Mark's been making a lot of changes and transparently publishing where they didn't have pay equality, and how he's making changes very aggressively to promote pay equality at Salesforce, but also leading by example for other companies. And that was one of the questions that came up I wanted to raise with you as well, is how do you feel about pay equality, and how much of an impact, negative impact, does that make, or have you seen that make as you go through your career?
Yeah, I do think that's an issue. I've definitely known it personally. There was one company in my past, which I won't name, where I found out how much less I was making than peers, or how much less stock I had than somebody that started at the same time as I did. And it's so disheartening when you learn that. And I just had dinner a month or so ago with 3 other women that I consider good friends and colleagues, and we were talking about negotiating pay. And if you read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, which I loved, there's a whole article about women and negotiating, and it's just true. Women take a different tact to negotiating, and women are much more inclined to not negotiate hard. And I don't know why that is. I won't even venture to understand why. But I even see it in myself, and I know, on the spectrum, I'm pretty tough and strong, and I'm probably a decent negotiator. But there are times when I feel like I I don't want to get into this big negotiation. I'm just this, it's fine, but let's just end it here because I don't want to fight the fight, or I'm not sure I'll win the fight. I felt that myself. In fact, I felt that actually relatively recently. And I literally on the way in kept telling myself, if I were a man, how would I handle this? And reminding myself, okay, I'm not going to give in. And I know when this person says this, this is going to be my answer, and I'm just going to hold the line. And even in the whole discussion, it's uncomfortable for me. I'd just rather say, okay, let's just call it this and move on. And I've had to, it's taken me many years to learn how to be a tougher, harder negotiator. So I absolutely relate to the struggle. I think some of it goes back to having confidence and knowing your worth. I think some of it has to do with practicing. I also think a lot of it has to do with you got to go talk to other people and understand, well, what is this role worth? What are you making? What are peers making in this organization? And then when you have those facts, it's easier for you to walk in with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder that like, hey, you're paying so-and-so this, then why should I get less than that? But I do think we have a little bit of a ways to go. I think most jobs are negotiated one by one, not, it's not like the government where there's just bands of salaries or, a teaching job where you are paid a certain amount for certain years of service. It's just in that individual negotiation, and women just have to learn more about how to do it, think more about how to do it, remind themselves to be brave, to keep asking for what they deserve, but also to arm themselves with the facts about what this position really should pay, and in both compensation as well as equity, and not give in to a lower number.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And just thinking through that personally, I get hit a lot more from men than women in general. Maybe that's just because there's just more men in tech than women, but I hear a lot more from past guys that I've worked with than women asking feedback on stock or comp and all that kind of stuff. And I agree with you. I think it's so important to reach out to others that are peers, but also people that you've worked with in the past. Okay, I'm thinking about this role. What do you think would be the right comp? How do I think about that? And call on people that you trust, that you worked with in the past, and manage that network. I think that's one of the most important things that we all can do, especially earlier on in the career, is know who the people are that you can trust, that share your values, whether they're men or women. And in stress situations, you're going to see what people are really made out of. The ones that lean in, the ones that support you in times of stress, are the ones you can trust for the rest of your career. And then call on those people when you're making changes or when you're considering things for your own career. They want to help you, so don't be shy on that. There's a question that flew in about your confidence, which as people can pick up on is solid. Where's that? What would you recommend? Or what are some tips that you give women on developing the confidence and making sure that the voice in your head is supportive and not tearing you down, which I think is one of the most important things for anybody to mature and manage, especially earlier on in their careers?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. It's a hard one. I think, some people are just, I even see it in my daughters and their friends, and I think some kids are just innately more confident and others struggle with it a little bit. I do think that there's this whole, I forget what people call it, it's like the voices in your head syndrome. There's like someone actually named this syndrome that, women are more likely to have that little voice in their head that says, oh, but you're not that good, and you're not really worth that pay. And I'm lucky that I don't have that particular voice in my head. But I just said there are definitely times when I feel like, oh, I'm not sure I'm actually worth what I'm going to ask for, et cetera. And I think part of it is what we just said, is asking around. But I also think part of it is just is practicing and going out and trying to do those things that you think you may not be able to do, and being willing to feel what it feels like to not be able to do them and work through that, and also take from that, I mean, I've certainly had plenty of failure in my life. And I've made bad job decisions in my life. And I think that what I like to do is instead of saying, God, I must have really sucked and I should never have done something because I wasn't good at it, I look at it and I say, well, I definitely made a bad decision because that wasn't the right fit, or I didn't do the right thing, or maybe I didn't even have the right skill set for that particular job. And put that into your psyche and learn from it to just have more confidence that next time I'm going to make a much better decision. So even failures can be turned into positive. And the flip side is that if you do push yourself outside of your comfort zone and take some risks, knowing that you're going to be able to handle the failure if it comes, but also there are plenty of times that you're going to have success. And that's when you really get the confidence. That's when you really, it's like, think about the scary things you've done in your life. Like some people jump out of airplanes, or even I watched my little niece who's 10 be petrified to go down this really, it was a pretty frightening water slide. And she was petrified. She sat up there for 30 minutes, and I thought she wasn't going to do it. And I thought, the whole day, if she doesn't do it, she's not going to feel good about herself. And she finally made herself do it with a little push from my brother. And, I mean, she was walking on air the whole day. She couldn't stop talking about it and how great the slide was and how exhilarating, and it wasn't scary at all, and she couldn't wait to do it again. And I just think making yourself do those things that you aren't sure are going to come out right, and knowing that it's okay if you fail, that's where you get the confidence to go do more and more of it.
Yeah, great points. And there's a simple equation that I've thought about a lot and tell people early in their careers to think through is that preparation plus perspiration minus interference equals your potential. And the minus interference is that voice in your head. And I think everybody's got one. If you can train, because I do think it's learned behavior, that if you can train the voice in your head to be a positive one over time, then you're gonna achieve your potential. And those are great stories that you told about your niece. Is that what you said?
Yeah, my niece.
I could just see a girl, going down the slide and just like strutting afterwards. That's
she
awesome.
She was. I have one other piece of advice about the voice in your head too, and it comes from kind of an unorthodox way. I have a good friend who sadly has a daughter who is battling OCD. And for those of you that know what OCD is, there's a lot of like rituals and things that you feel like you have to do in order to get through your day. And the therapy that they do for this child is really interesting because it's a voice. You've got this voice in your head that says, I have to turn the light switch on and off 3 times before I leave every room, or I've got to wash my hands 5 times or they're not clean. It's a voice. And what they do is they teach the child that the voice is actually not their voice. The voice is outside of them. It's somebody else's voice. And it's a bad voice, and they need to stand up for that voice and kick it to the curb. So instead of trying to change what the voice is saying, they're told that they actually even name it. So like you give this voice a name, the voice is Joanne. And whenever you hear this voice, you say, nope, Joanne, sorry, like you don't rule me. You don't tell me what to do. I decide what to do. And I thought it was an interesting way to handle any kind of voices that any of us have in our head. If you've got this voice that says you can't do it, you're not good, then you say, you know what, who are you? You're not even me. I know I'm good, and I'm not going to listen to you today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Taking ownership of it, too, that way, that you're in control and it's not something else that's controlling you is such an important lesson. There was a question a couple questions actually around tips and situational mastery when you are surrounded by men, or you look around the executive table and see mostly men. How do you overcome the struggle or thinking about yourself being different, or others not giving you the right chance, et cetera, or just tips in general around working in an environment where you've got more men peers than women peers? Yeah,
well, a couple thoughts on that. One, and I wrote in an article for Inc. about how to teach your daughter to be a leader. And one of them, and it's probably too late for most of us grown-ups, and I still try to do this, but having your kids play in co-ed groups is super important. I was a bit of a tomboy myself, so I was like playing tackle football with my brother when I was a kid. And that certainly has helped me. I mean, I feel pretty comfortable in a room of men, partly because, I spent a lot of my childhood being with a lot of guys. Not everybody has had that experience. But, I guess my advice is try not to even think of it that way. I mean, you can be just as strong, you can be just as vocal, you're not any less smart. There's no study out there that says, well, men in executive positions are smarter and wiser than women in executive positions. It's just absolutely not true. In fact, and I wrote another article about why diversity is so impactful to performance, women come to things with different point of views, and that different way of thinking about things and that different point of view is super valuable. And I remember a time, in fact, I wrote about this in my article, where I was the only woman on the executive team at several companies. But I can remember a time when we were really struggling with a situation for the company, and basically everyone in the room thought we should do one thing, and I just completely disagreed. And I vocally said with passion why I disagreed. I was literally the only one in the room that didn't share the same opinion. And I felt good about doing that, because the whole point of having a leadership discussion is that you're trying to get to the right answer. And if everybody all has the same opinion and the same way to think about that, you may miss the right answer. And I'm not saying that my answer is the right answer, but I'm saying that it led to a good spirited debate about what strategy to take. And those are healthy, positive things. And most people think they're healthy, positive things. So I think part of it is just, again, make yourself take the risk. Speak up. Do not have a fear that, what you have to say is any less valuable. Speak up, and my guess is you'll have a positive reaction, even if you disagree with others, and that will give you the confidence to do it again. But never let yourself think that you're any less valued or intelligent than any other male in the room or anyone in the room, regardless of their gender.
Well, and to that point, if you're in the right situation, right company, you're surrounded by people with the right values, they're not thinking that way. And so don't let yourself be the first one to think that way. Everyone in that room, whether they're men or women, are thinking about how they can be better leaders. Being a better leader is about making the others in the room more successful. It's not in their own head thinking about how they can, screw things up for the other person. So if you feel like you're in a situation where others are wearing small hats and thinking about themselves, then you may not be in the right place.
Yeah.
That's the thing to look at is, okay, who am I working with? Am I working with men that respect diversity? Am I working with others that want to build teams that aren't just like themselves? I mean, the best leaders are constantly thinking about that and building teams that are going to complement who they are, both from a gender diversity situation, but also just backgrounds and approaches and how they're wired. And you should see that in examples far beyond gender. And there's a follow-up question in this area, too, about Stacey, have you ever had to mask your emotions or for fear that others might see you as being weak, or does that just not come up for you?
There was a whole article about, telling women it's okay to cry at work, and I just don't agree with that. I just don't. I think sometimes, your eyes are going to well up, and I'm not going to tell the stories because they're too long and not even that interesting, but one of them was in fact at Success Factors. It wasn't with you, Paul, but I can remember a time when I had worked so hard on something, and I had put so much passion into it, and I expected a response from someone and I didn't get it. And I remember standing there and just thinking, oh, my God, I'm so tired. I'm so overworked. I put everything into this, and this is how you're reacting. And I remember the tears kind of coming to my eyes. And, I feel like you've got to – a lot of men do not know how to deal with that. And we probably know that in our personal lives. I mean, I've certainly dated people that if you cry, then you get what you want. And unfortunately, my husband is not like that now, so it doesn't work for me anymore. But, taking that tact at work, and I know you can't always control it, and sometimes those tears are going to well up, and my advice to you is, it's not okay. You can't break down emotionally. You've got to either get yourself out of the situation and then go cry on your own, go cry to your husband, to a trusted friend. I think being super overly emotional at work is just really hard for everybody, including me. I mean, it's hard for me when people cry. Now, the flip side of it is I think women may be more inclined to cry. I think men have their own version of emotion, and theirs tends to be a little more aggressive, right, where they're mad and they're pounding fists, and I think that's equally inappropriate. So I guess my feeling on this, and sometimes it's harder to do than not, but men and women, it's just super overly emotional responses are just, it's better to save those for outside of the workplace.
Yep, and I was just reading a question about, so emotions being beyond crying, anger, ups and downs. But I think you hit that it's not appropriate to bring a lot of emotion. I think the worst part is if the emotion is focused on a person. I think if it's situational and it's not about a person or it's targeted, then emotion or passion can be a good thing. But if it's a personal comment or a personal emotion, whether it's anger or it's crying, it really shouldn't be in the workplace. And if it happens, then whoever's the most senior person should be addressing that one-on-one with the person that's going through that, whether it's a man or a woman, and trying to help and support, but also help them to understand what that does. Because if in a team environment there's emotion that is pointed at another person, that's going to break down the constructs and the trust of the team as well over time. So I think you're spot on. It's using it in the right way. Another question around when you consider a company, what benefits or perks do you consider important to look at as a woman in tech?
Yeah, I think that's super important. And you touched on that earlier, Paul. If you find yourself in a situation where you're feeling like you can't get ahead just because you're a woman, or you're sitting in a room full of men and you speak up and they shut you down every time, get out. I mean, this is a better time than ever for us to stand up and say, we're not going to take it. I think companies are trying really hard to have diversity, and if they have practices that don't promote it, it'll be good for us to stand up to it. I also do think, as it relates to, there's been a bunch of questions in the chat about the guilt of being a good mom, and I do think finding an environment that works for your particular situation is important. And that means that if I leave at 4 o'clock because I want to take my kid to gymnastics today, and not, once a year when there's a recital, but honestly, every Thursday at 4, it's really important to me to leave and go take my daughter to whatever her activity is. I don't want to feel like everybody in the room is, in the office is looking at me as I walk out the door. I want it to be an environment where everybody knows that everybody's working hard and doing a good job, and it's okay to have some flexibility in your hours, because you know what? I'm probably back online at 9, and I may have been online at 5 a.m. that morning. And I think having those conversations really up front in the interview process. I mean, I'm at the point now, and as I've mentioned, I'm making a transition in my career right now, so I've been having a lot of career discussions about different with different companies. And I literally, one of the very first things I say is I talk about my kids, and I make it very clear that I am a mom first, and I will always be a mom first. And if that's not going to work in this environment, then, we should just have that discussion now, because it will have set expectations on both sides. Now, I've certainly gotten to a point in my career where I can say those things. Not, when you're earlier in your career and you're really moving up and you really want the job, it's a little harder to make that clear, but I don't think it's unrealistic to ask, is there flexibility for me to do X, Y, Z? I think, that's kind of hitting it from the mom balance side of things. I think from is there respect for women? That's almost even easier. Just look around the company. Are there women on the leadership team? Are there women in leadership positions? How many women did you meet in the interview process? That'll tell you right there what kind, is this company promoting women, and does it value women in leadership positions? It's actually a fairly easy one to just look around and assess.
Yeah, and the softer side of a culture, asking questions about, describe the culture of the company, describe the work environment, and how do people get successful here, and look at, when you think about benefits, what are some of the policies around, vacation, or how flexible is the company around that? Kind of looking for, is the CEO of the company somebody that really watches when people come in and leave, and then that cascades through the company, or is there a trust that's built into the culture of the company that we're only hiring people that are going to have a high passion and I get shit done style to them, and we're going to trust that we're hiring the right people, and you don't have to watch when people are clocking in or clocking out. And you can find that out by asking open-ended questions around the culture and style of people that are successful. And when you're interviewing with a woman, ask her, how do you feel about, you're one of the women execs here. What's it like being a woman here, and how is diversity supported? Not just gender diversity, but you'll pick it up in other ways as well, and it should be very easy to pick up in the interview process.
Yep.
Yeah, one other quick question, going back a little bit. So there's an interesting kind of situational question about being surrounded by men or being put into a situation that's uncomfortable. How do you deal with a situation where a man makes an inappropriate comment to you in the work environment?
Well, that's a good question, and that's certainly happened to me. I think it's happened to me in two ways, and I'll answer in both ways. One, it's happened to me where I just can't even be bothered to care. It just goes in one ear and out the other. And, some of that comes from, as I mentioned, I played with boys a lot as a kid, and I just know that, men tend to rib each other. I'll tell a funny story. I went to my daughter's elementary school to help the girls get into their Halloween costumes. They were first graders. And I just had to laugh, because as they're getting into their Halloween costumes, they're like, oh, Lexi, you look so cute. Oh, my gosh, look at Gemma. She's so cute. Oh, my gosh, they're just complimenting each other. And I thought to myself, this is not happening where the boys are putting their costumes on. If anything, they're probably ribbing each other. And I think that, men tend to give each other shit. It's just part of the way they relate to each other. And so most of the time, I just think, you can't even be bothered with it. The haters are going to hate. Just let it go. Move on about your day. Now, if it's happening regularly, if it's starting to get personal, I had a situation where I was literally just feeling harassed, then you got to go to HR. You just have to. I think this is an environment where, I should take that back. I think if you can try to address it directly with the person and just say, you know what, your comments are starting to really bother me. Could you just please stop? And dealing with things directly is always the best way to go. But if it's not something you can shake off and it's getting to the point where it's not going in one ear and out the other, then I think you're absolutely justified in going to HR.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And any CEO is going to want to know about a situation like that, because then you've got a cancer in the company that you got to get addressed or get rid of, and see yourself as a great leader, bringing that up so that it can be addressed, and it's not your issue, it's the other person's issue. And I think that's one of the mental things to think through in these situations, is that other person's got the problem, not you. And if they've got a problem that they keep bringing up and you address it with them and they keep doing it, then that's their insecurity, that's their hang up, and one way or another it's got to get addressed, and it's going to make the company a better place, and it's going to help other women in the company by you taking a leadership position with it and trusting that you and your peers are going to address it appropriately. And if it isn't addressed appropriately, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right. So, yeah, I wanted to go back to comments or kind of key things that you learned. Like how can women and men provide more help for women tech execs to change the world in the future? So there's obviously, it's a big discussion point today, but what are some of the takeaways for you personally, or groups or initiatives or gatherings that you think are really having an impact that people can get involved with, either in the larger scheme of things or that where you start to spend your time, that you think are helpful for women in tech in the future?
Yeah, someone just asked me that yesterday, like, what organizations should I join? And, I unfortunately don't know of any. I didn't do much of that. I do think, again, going back to Sandberg's book, as she talks about the lean-in circles, some of it I think is organic, and that's look around you, find other women in your office, I think most people are inclined to help and mentor when asked. So approach them and say, hey, I'd love to take you to lunch, or I've got something going on. I'd love to run by you, and develop those mentor relationships and those peer or relationships with people right around you that you work with. And that's also great, because then you have a topic that is relevant. When you ask your questions, you ask your advice, you're asking them of somebody that's close to them because they work too. I think that's a good way to do it. I also really encourage women. It's not only other women that can be great mentors to you. I mean, if I had to list the top 5 mentors in my career, I think there's only one woman in that list. A lot of my mentors have been men that I've worked for, that I've gone to. I mean, Paul knows. I'll still call Paul and say, I need to run this by you. Like, what do you think? And I have several other men that are like on speed dial on my phone that were people I worked for or people I worked with. Like, don't be afraid. It doesn't, it's not gender specific who should be your mentor and who should help you with how to handle your career. I think mentors come in all shapes and sizes.
Yep. And then going back to the profile of tech, it's interesting that you are an English major. What about women that have computer science or engineering degrees? The world's going more towards big data and analytics. How do you coach women that either want to be leaders in the more technical parts of a company, or those that, like yourself, don't have a tech degree but want to move more into technology, either roles or deeper tech companies? What's your advice, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that change too. I mean, again, back to my own little girls, I think there's a lot more opportunities for them to do things. I mean, even I look at Legos. When I was a little girl, my brother was obsessed with Legos, and I never really got into it. But now I look at the Legos, which my girls love, and they're castles and they're princesses, and they make pink and light blue Legos now. And I think, there's just natural things occurring in society that I think are helping bring, helping girls see that they can build things, and they can, they're all playing the same apps on their phones. So I think naturally that's going to happen. But I think for right now, again, like you got to figure out, well, first of all, you have to not be afraid to fail. Go take that stupid class at Berkeley on how to code. And it definitely made me realize that I will never be a coder. But, if there are little things you can do to bring up your knowledge, you don't just say, look, I'm not good at data. I don't know how to run Excel. I'd rather just go handle the logistics of the event. No, you've got to not just handle the logistics. You've got to look at, well, what did that event bring in, and what are the numbers, and what is the conversion rate, and how can I, do that better? And for all the women that find themselves in the room of men and not sure that they should be there, I mean, one way to really add value is to be able to be analytical and to show those numbers. And the only way you're going to do it is by starting to do it. And instead of categorizing your own self as someone that isn't analytical or can't handle data, or, you don't have to code, but the ability to put together a detailed Excel spreadsheet that gives you actual metrics is important. And I think, we can't just kid ourselves and say, oh, we should be considered more analytical. No, we have to go out and do it. You have to actually learn it. If you don't know how to do it, go ask somebody how you do it, find a mentor, take a class, go there and make it happen.
That's great. Well, we're coming close to the top of the hour. A parting question, and again, thank you, Stacey, for sharing all of your learnings and guidance. You're such an impressive person, and I know it's helping a lot of people, not only on this call, but you touch a lot of people's lives over your career, and a lot more to come from you in the future. As a parting question,
thank you.
There's been a lot of chatter about it, but also selfishly as a father of 3 young women, I'd love to hear your best advice kind of summarized for future women execs. What are the kind of 2 or 3 key parting thoughts or summary points that you want people to take away from the discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on most of them. Number 1 is take risks. Be brave. Find a way to get yourself to the top of that big slide and slide down it. And I think that's just the most important way to find confidence, because yes, be prepared that you may have some failures and think through the consequences and be ready for those failures, but take those risks. And then I think the second one that we've touched on too is just know your worth. You're not any less anything than anybody else. We are not an inferior gender by any stretch of the imagination, and you have to just constantly remind yourself of that. You are just as smart. In fact, you have other skills that make you even better in business, and embrace those in yourself and remind yourself daily of that.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a terrific discussion and very encouraging to see everybody hanging in and lots of interaction in the chat room as well. So again, thank you for participating. If anybody wants to follow up, you can find Stacey or myself via Twitter, LinkedIn. And again, thank you for participating, and look forward to future webinars about leadership and women in tech. And Stacey, again, thanks for your time and for all the knowledge and advice. Super valuable.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye, everyone.